Aidan, how are you doing?
Flying, thanks. Yeah, really looking forward to the football this weekend, including this one. And from a Galway point of view, the injuries keep stacking up. Damien Comer amongst those out now, and a few others doubtful. Galway obviously coming in cold after that Sligo by Mayo playing their 5th weekend in a row is the narrative that we're leading into it here. So all pointing to a Mayo win, I presume.
Well, I suppose I'm a big man to look at the bookies because they seem to take everything into account. So I think it's only something like half a point of a difference. So it's quite even money in the bookies. So they know something. But if you look at form, I suppose if you're to talk this out 3 weeks ago, you'd have Galway favourites. So look at the Connacht final takes a life of its own, in particular Mayo and Galway. And like I said, I suppose the talk is Galway are kind of cold, and I suppose they would have felt they might have needed that match against Sligo to get back on the road a bit, maybe, just to a bit of confidence. But then you look at the other side, and you said, Mayo are playing 5 weeks in a row, which can take a toll. So either way, it should be a very, very close game. It normally is with Mayo. So here's hoping.
What happened to Galway in that league game, Kevin, and is it going to have a factor this weekend?
Yeah, look, it's going to. I suppose there's two things here. It can give the confidence a bit of a dent, but sometimes it can work the other way. It can kind of give you a kick in the backside at times and get you ready for something. So, even if I think if you look at the Roscommon Mayo match last week, it's probably one of the first years that Roscommon and the supporters of Roscommon and a lot of people around would have felt that Roscommon had a really, really good chance of the game last week. And I think a little of that probably fed into the Roscommon players, to be honest. And, it's a known fact like that when Roscommon, I suppose when they feel that their underdogs are not given a chance, they really, really grind things out and they never give up. Where I thought last week that they looked really, really flat from the very start and that fighting edge wasn't there. So it's just hard to know how good this Mayo team are. They have a few new lads in as well. But I don't think they got a proper test last week.
Yeah, and it is difficult to know where Galway are at. Like Owen says, are they the team that were hockeyed by Mayo, or the team that gave Dublin like a bit of a run? And even in that game there was, some of the factors that they're dealing with this weekend, as in Noah Comer and Shane Walsh and Gary Sice come in at half time. Like it's impossible to read the form lines of Galway is what I'm finding
very hard
in the run into
it. No, very, very, very hard. And look, I think Shane is back. So he's only really missed half a football during the year, so he should be okay. Damien, unfortunately, again for Damien, he's having a really bad run, and we missed him all last year. We missed the whole league in 2018 when we got promoted. He just came on as a sub in Croke Park against Kildare, so he's missed an awful lot over the last 3 years, and we only got him in for a half last year. So, I suppose Damien is just been really, really unfortunate for him, but he's a big player and he's a big loss. So it's hard. Pádraig has put his own players in here at the minute. He's tried a lot of younger players. I suppose unfortunately the league didn't finish out for him to try other players and see where they're at. So, Paul Kelly, Jason, young lads put in, we'll say, with one game experience. It's probably hard to see. I don't know what the team's going to be, but it's pretty hard to put them in first time because we don't know what you're going to get. So, but you look at when we finished last year, I think the average age of the panel is 24.5. So it's in a good place, and Galway being good at the start of the league, but it's very hard to know at this time. And again, you're going to look at weather conditions. It's going to be weather conditions as well are going to be probably poor. So, having said that, look, I expect Galway to rise their game, and I just don't know exactly how good Mayo are really.
What should Galway do? Where should they position Shane Walsh to get the best out of him this weekend, Kevin?
But I better not reply to that because I get speak anyway. But look, you try to keep Shane up the field as high as possible. Probably in the full forward line and coming out to the half forward line is probably the ideal situation for Shane. And again, even with that, he will get pulled back because if he's working hard enough, he's going to have to at times follow a player. You just can't stand up, and he's aware of that. And again, if you go back to the Monaghan game this year in the league, Shane was actually working hard again like he had been. I think he was the guy that fouled McManus, or one of the Monaghan guys, for the penalty. I think we forget to look at that now. So it's important that we look at everything. And Shane will be, you try to keep him as close to goal as you can, but you don't want his back to goal either, where you're going to have a dog at corner back that's on him all the time. He needs to come out a little bit to get space so he can get those runs that we're so used to, And in fairness, when he was doing that for us, he should undoubtedly have got an All-Star in 2018.
100%. He was brilliant that year. Is there a case, though, if you play him too deep that Mayo just put Paddy Durcan on him, and Durcan does to him what he did to Enda Smith last week or to Jack McCaffrey last year in the All-Ireland semi-final.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I mean, if I had my choice with him and you have players available to you, I'd have him in the full forward line, absolutely.
Right.
Again, you're going to have the likes of an Oisin Mullen now, or it could be a Keegan, because he's in the full back line, who could pick up Shane in the full back line. So Mayo have options here to go after, the strongest players, because even with that, Keegan and Mullen will come from deep. So do you let them go or do you not let them go? And if you're not set up properly, there's going to be massive holes in the defence. And, that's something that we got great joy out of when we covered up the middle three channels of the pitch and kept the two outside channels 1 and 5 open. So we were taking Mayo down the sidelines, and they didn't like that. And, even the good games they had against Dublin, Dublin would have been quite open in the middle, where allowed their runners come like Turk and Boyle, and it was lovely to watch, but they were given space to do it. And the best way to take on Mayo is to take them down channel 1 and 5, and it does frustrate them, and it suffocates them, and hit them in the counter, because they're really, really good footballers, and they seem to form one or two more.
So basically, stop the middle, block up the middle, because that was, to go back to that league game, and I know it might not be worth anything this weekend, but it did seem, Kevin, that they gave up a lot of Mayo scores in the scoring zone. Like, the D where the Dubs will take their points from, that was just wide open all afternoon long against Mayo. So they just need to plug those gaps right through the middle, and they've got a serious chance this weekend in stopping Mayo's attack.
Yeah, and again, that's easier said than done. I mean, that takes a lot of work to do that. And it's nice that you mentioned that match. If you look at the amount of times that Sean D. Kelly was left isolated 1v1 with crossfield balls, which is impossible to defend anyway for a defender. These straight balls in, if you have pace, you'll defend them and get a fist on it, but the crossfield balls are really difficult. And then if you have no pressure on the kicker, that's doubly bad, because they can place the crossfield ball. And that was something that Galway won't be happy with in the last game, but they should learn from it. But if you have no pressure on the ball and you haven't your back covered up and you have a 1v1 with crossfield balls, show me any team in Ireland that will defend that. So there is a lot of stuff that needs to be tightened up on for that. But look, that was a game. I presume there was a lot of experimental going on in that game. So hopefully there'll be something learned from it.
When you were Galway manager, where did you want to see Aidan O'Shea play when you were coming up against Mayo?
To be honest, it didn't bother us. Right. I suppose the first year we went in, was the thing was, at the time, before we knew our players and before we developed the systems and stuff, I didn't like to see him really on the edge of the square, because big strong man, good hands, fairly good at getting frees, even though sometimes there mightn't be frees, but he'll get them. And but again, as time went on, I used to love to see him on the edge of the square, because you double team him, and he gets frustrated if he can't twist and turn and hasn't got space, and his power then is gone. And as I used to call it, even a weak defender, as in physically wise, if you're like a Velcro man where your hands are going in and out, and knowing that the likes of Aidan or any other big player has to either bounce or solo after 4 steps, you're going to frustrate somebody if you've got a 2v1. So, the latter end, I would love if Aidan was inside and all the ball was going in, because you'd have the plan developed for that, and it sucked the life out of Mayo if the likes of a big player like that wasn't doing the business. So, to answer your question, at the start, didn't like seeing full forward, but at the end, would have no qualms of going full forward.
In an overall sense, Kevin, it seems like over the last few weeks that a lot of people are starting to re-back Mayo to get the job done in an overall sense, in terms of like putting it up to Dublin. And maybe some of that is to do with some of the other contenders kind of falling off. But do you see where people are coming from on that? Like when you look at, like, they've beaten Leitrim and they beat a pretty poor Roscommon team last weekend. What's your sense of Mayo's capacity to win in All-Ireland?
One of the contenders are gone. We know that, okay. But again, I think it'll be unjust just to say that Kerry are gone and shouldn't be gone. That Cork side have been improving for quite a while, so they're now coming into one of the contenders regardless. Mightn't have the experience, it was always going to be down to 4 or 5, 6 teams anyway. So, like I said, Leitrim, Roscommon, and even the Galway match was so open, you really can't, in any shape or form, say we know now that Mayo are ready, because we don't know. Oisin Mullins is corner back. He likes to come forward. Little bit of frailties in man marking. Full back line has changed. We've We have a new, McLaughlin wing back who looked like another good footballer, to be fair to him. But Lee Keegan's got back corner back as well. So I'm not so sure he, unless he gets a man-marking job or someone up the field, whether he's a cornerback or not. So there's loads of questions to be asked. Are that midfield good enough? Matthew Ann's kind of its second year as such, had a good first year. We just don't know when it comes up against the bigger stuff. Had they got it in the centre area. So, somebody will tell a lot. Now, if Galway turn up like it did in June, we still mightn't know. But I'd like to see Galway turning up with a real fight in their bellies, with an organisation and a plan to stop their bigger players like Aidan O'Shea. If you look at the analysis after the Galway game, it was as if Aidan O'Shea had never been played full forward before. We're talking about this great plan of Aidan O'Shea full forward, and he'll be there for the year coming forward. Then the following week, you look at Tyrone, where they had a bit of a plan and they had a sweeper. Aidan O'Shea's game wasn't near as effective. We're back to the old talk again. So you just can't get excited over one or two games because, we talked about Kerry last week. Cork, for the first time, probably set up a lot different than they had in the past. A little bit more of a plan, a bit more ruthless, blocking off channels for Kerry. And all of a sudden, it was as if Kerry changed their game plan and wasn't kicking the ball in. Probably couldn't kick it in a lot because of weather conditions. Pressure on the ball, and also Cork had the back covered up a lot better than I'd seen in the past. So, to be saying Kerry just went to a different game, they were forced to go a different game to a degree. And, having said that, we look at Kerry and Monaghan, both teams out of the All-Ireland series now. But you've got to look a lot deeper, and we'll say if Clifford had been as clinical as he had in the past, he'd have 2 14-yard frees. Kerry would probably be still in this. If McManus had kicked his last 3 wides, Monaghan would probably still be in this. So it's not as simple as, saying Peter King would change his tactics or blah, blah, blah. There's loads of other stuff in there.
Can that Galway team win in All-Ireland?
To be honest, it's new, and where it was taken over, and Paul would have said it himself, and he still reiterated it. I hear John Cannon saying last week in his interview, All-Ireland is what they're looking for. It's not just Connacht. So it's great to see that they're that ambitious. And I suppose, to be fair, Galway for the last 2 or 3 years have been, with a little bit of injury-free, have been the top 3 or 4 teams anyway. So they should be thereabouts. I suppose there's newer players in the weekend, and there's now a confidence thing in the last 2 or 3 weeks. Can they lift that? And if they do, and get a few players back, and get a good defensive system that can attack quickly out of it, there's no reason why not.
I understand that you have an autobiography coming out, Kevin, and it's, from what I understand, part autobiography, part coaching clinic, and I wondered what your take on you mentioned Kerry a couple of times there. A lot of conversation, obviously, about the final play of the game and maybe Tommy Walsh's role in that. What was your coming from that sort of coaching side of it? What was your take on that?
Yeah, to be honest, it's something I'd be always looking awful close at because, you're right, and we'll be bringing out a book next week or two, and there's a lot about coaching in there, and there's but people forget in a championship match now when it's really up to 80 minutes by the time you had the injury time and stuff like that. So you really need to prepare for 80 minutes, and if it's 78, it's 78. So in that 80 minutes, one player, the most you're on the ball is 1 minute. So I think there's a lot left behind in the coaching side of it. How can someone impact a game for the other 79 minutes when you're off the ball? And sometimes it's really hard. I think that most time your opponent is dangerous when he doesn't have the ball because we tune out and we don't understand the amount of impact you can have if you stay tuned in. So, for instance, you're right. You mentioned about the Tommy Walsh thing. That was something that really caught me. And again, I'm not blaming Tommy Walsh here, but has Tommy Walsh ever been coached how to block out? There's a thing there we'll talk about in the book is, it's how to find, feel and fetch. You really have to find your opponent as to where he is and what threat he is when the ball is in the air. You've then got to make a physical contact so you feel where he is. At that point, then you can decide, well, do I go for the fetch or don't I? And in Tommy Walsh's case, the last day, all he had to do was understand how to find and feel, and forget about the fetch because he didn't need it. That game was there to be won. But look, I don't blame Tommy Walsh in that, but it is something. Yes, in the book I'll be talking about all these skills off the ball, but we take them for granted. They're not analysed. It's really the invisible game, and the stuff that people don't see has a huge impact on games, and that's one of them.
Yeah, it's called The Invisible Game, and we're going to have a read of it and get you back on, Kevin, at some point, hopefully over the next few weeks. Really enjoyed that. Thanks a million.
No problem. Thanks very much.